Welcome in to another episode of Home Field Advantage. My name is Will Highland. It is November 30th, 2023. Here we are at the end of the month. Hope you're all having a great week or weekend wherever you may be across our great country or our great land. You know, from the West Coast to the Gold Coast to the South Coast to the Bold Coast. We hope you're tuning in wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, even on our YouTube channel. We're happy to have you in. It's going to be a pretty loaded show. I say that every time, but for just a brief amount of time here, we have a lot to get to. We're sort of going to be touching on some things that some people might consider old news because it happened on Monday, but I'm recording on Wednesday evening and I haven't recorded since Monday morning. So if things have happened in the past few days, then they are things that that I'm talking about because they're recent to me. So I hope you all understand that. But I think this first topic is going to be something that is hot on everyone's mind still, and that is the NFL writ large. There's been a lot of talk about parity in the NFL. There's been a lot of talk about competitiveness in the NFL. In fact, Tom Brady, um, my childhood idol, had a lot to say about it last week. I think he even used the term mediocre to describe some of the football that had been played. And look, as a Patriots fan, past, present, and future, um, you know, this season has been anything but mediocre for the Patriots in the wrong direction. So, you know, who knows? Maybe Brady is even talking about his former team in that regard. And even his other former team, the Buccaneers, they're right back where they were before he got there. A meddling team that wasn't really competing and you didn't really think had a shot at the Super Bowl. To look at the Jets without Aaron Rodgers, right? The Jets without Aaron Rodgers are dysfunctional, not able to stay in the playoff hunt at this moment in time. I mean, they're not eliminated by any means, but it doesn't look great for them. Look at the NFC in the absence of Rodgers, Breeze, and Brady. That conference is really propped up by an Eagles team that is phenomenal and a Niners team that is clicking on all cylinders, and a Dallas team that is certainly stout offensively as well, but and they have a tremendous defensive playmakers all over the place. But I look at the rest of that conference, and I mean, the Minnesota Vikings were supposed to be good. They laid an egg against the Bears at home on Monday night. Meanwhile, the Lions were supposed to be really good and had a good record, and then kind of got exposed on Thanksgiving. And I look at the rest of that. I mean, the Rams won a Super Bowl 2 years ago, and they look bad. So Tom Brady had a point, right? Like, and Tom Brady knows this, right? Like, he played in multiple eras. He played in the 2000 to 2007 era, where I would consider defenses to be, more impactful than they are now. You were allowed to hit harder. Coaches, there were more coaches that spent longer times at places and really had systems installed for long periods of time. It's not like it is now, where coaches get maybe 2 years, and then if you're not a perennial contender, you're out. And then he played in the 07 to 2015 era, where I would consider it to be sort of moving into a pass-happy league. And penalties getting introduced during that time that were advantageous to the offense. Maybe not penalties getting introduced, but penalties becoming more common. And then he played finally in the sort of twilight of his career when he won more Super Bowls, was in an era that was completely offensive driven, but yet he won Super Bowl 53 in in a 13-3 score in which he basically was a game manager, and then won a Super Bowl 2 years later, where I think he threw 4 TDs. So the variety of teams that Tom Brady won with, in my opinion, Patriots fandom aside, does sort of give him a license to critique the league as a whole. Now, of course, anytime Tom Brady says something remotely creative, for lack of a better term, the haters come out of the woodwork. And he's not a current player, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time, as I would have maybe 5 or 6 years ago, jumping into all the haters. Max Kellerman's proven wrong. Rob Parker was proven wrong. Nick Wright was proven wrong. All those guys were proven wrong about Tom Brady as he was playing. But a guy like Alex Smith comes out here. And look, Alex Smith, let's just do the tale of the tape here, right? I believe he was the number 1 overall pick in 2005 for San Francisco. He had a decent career with the 49ers, ultimately made his way over to the Chiefs, where he spent a good chunk of his seasons, including a time in which he lost the playoff game to Tom Brady, but also including a time in which he won a week 1 game against the Patriots when the Patriots were raising their 51 banner. Alex Smith came into town. He beat Tom Brady, I think that time, maybe one other time in their careers. But let's also be real that Alex Smith was a guy who lost his job. And as much as that horrific injury he had late in his career with Washington had a lot to do with his career coming to a close, this guy was replaced not once, but twice by somebody younger and less proven than he was. Colin Kaepernick took his job in 2012. In a year in which the year before, Alex Smith had gone to the NFC title game against the Giants and lost. A Giants team that wasn't supposed to be there beat them. 2012, he loses his job to Colin Kaepernick, and in this, after he comes back from an injury, Kaepernick keeps the job, brings them to a Super Bowl. Then in 2017, he has a pretty good year with the Chiefs. They go to the playoffs, but they lose a game they shouldn't have lost to the Titans, I believe, at home. And then in 2018, Patrick Mahomes gets his job over Alex Smith with the Kansas City Chiefs. So Alex Smith has lost his job to 2 younger, unproven guys. Granted, both of them ended up reaching the Super Bowl at one point in their careers. We're not going to get into the whole Kaepernick thing, but certainly Mahomes has had a strong career after he took over for Alex Smith. So what's it really about, Alex Smith? Is it about Tom Brady criticizing the league? Or is it more so that you lost your last 4 playoff games, including that one I mentioned to the Titans, and I believe 1 to the Steelers, 1 to the Colts, and perhaps 2018 season he didn't play. Mahomes had taken his job. 2017, I think, was the last time he appeared in a playoff game. They lost to the Titans. 2016, they lost to the Steelers. 2015, they lost to the Texans? Or did the Chiefs win that game? I'm drawing a blank. Oh, it was to the Patriots, of course. It was to Tom Brady in 2015. So he lost his last 3. Maybe he had another start in there that I'm missing. But either way, I mean, this dude did not have a ton of playoff success. He lost his job a couple times. Of course, I'm not discounting that he had a horrible injury and he came back from that in strong fashion. He deserves all the credit in the world for that. But is it about Tom Brady critiquing the league and playing in a uncompetitive division, in the words of Alex Smith? Because that was the news. It was this week Alex Smith says on ESPN that Tom Brady played in the least competitive division in football. Is it really about that, or is it about Tom Brady was just really successful, so we have to find a way to discount that still in 2023? After he's retired, after he is by far the most decorated quarterback in the history of the sport. still have to find a way to discount that. I call BS. I also call BS because let's just rewind a little bit. Sure, Alex Smith played in an AFC West while he was with Kansas City that was pretty stout, right? Denver was always around. The Chargers with Phillip Rivers were hanging around every year. And in fact, Manning was playing for the Broncos a lot of those years. They overlapped. So yeah, he played in a tough AFC West. But can we talk about when he played in the NFC West? Can we talk about the year that he was playing for the Niners and in what was that, 2009 or 10? I think an 8-8 team made the playoffs and it wasn't his team. We talk about that whole stretch where after Sean Alexander, Matt Hasselbeck, and the Seahawks went to the Super Bowl 40 against the Steelers to the time that Seattle reclaimed that division around 2012 with Russell Wilson. Talk about that like 6-year span where the Rams sucked. The Cardinals were up and down with Kurt Warner and whomever prior to Carson Palmer. And it was really Alex Smith, who, by the way, was, as I said, drafted number 1 overall. Alex Smith in that division didn't win lickety split up until like 2010 or 11 when they made the title game a couple years in a row. And in fact, I think the 2012 title game was, again, Kaepernick leading that team, not Alex Smith. So what's it really about, Alex? Is it about Tom Brady critiquing a league that is, in fact, mediocre? Or is it about you and Tom Brady just having a better career than you? Because, again, a lot of times you can point to Brady's career in the AFC East and say that there were times where the AFC East actually came playing in a quote-unquote bad division, actually came back to bite them because their record might have been inflated, no pun intended. And if their record was inflated all those years and they weren't, and let's say their 13-3 record was fraudulent, then a team like the Kansas City Chiefs in 2015 should have had no problem taking care of the 12-4 Pats if they were just a byproduct of playing in a bad division. How come his 2015 Kansas City Chiefs didn't take advantage of a flailing Pats team that had lost 4 out of 6 to end the year? Was it because Tom Brady played in a bad division, or was it because Alex Smith teams weren't actually that good? I would go with the latter. So my point with this is, sure, the AFC East was bad a few times. But there were also times where, look, the Miami Dolphins beat the Pats once a year, basically, at the end of Brady's career. They lost home playoff games to the Jets. They would lose games to the Bills. In 2003, they lost to the Bills in week 1, 31-0. I mean, the idea that Brady just 6 automatic wins because he's in the AFC East, great. Well, what happens when you're playing Peyton Manning every year or Ben Roethlisberger every year and you still win, or Phillip Rivers every year and you still win those games? Joe Flacco twice in the playoffs. Yeah, Flacco might have got Brady twice, but in the playoffs, but I mean, the Pats still had to go through the Ravens, the Broncos, the Chargers, the Colts, all of those teams, the Steelers. None of those teams played in the AFC East. So, again, 2 things can be true at once. Yeah, maybe Tom Brady benefited a little bit from playing in the AFC East because he wasn't in a division with Peyton Manning or Russell Wilson like Alex Smith was. But he also still had to beat those competition or those teams when the competition was the most significant. And by and large, he did that outside of a couple of years. So again, a dumb thing for Alex Smith to say, because to me, it just opens up a whole can of worms on a guy that, look, I like Alex Smith. If Mac Jones was like Alex Smith, like I thought he was going to be, I thought the Patriots would be pretty good. I thought Alex Smith had a pretty good career. But as soon as you say something like this, you just open yourself up to all sorts of criticism. And, once I take out the magnifying glass and actually look at his career, I realize that, maybe it's less about what Tom Brady said about the rest of the NFL and more about him and his career, and how that all turned out. Again, I wish nothing but the best for the guy. I always liked him. He was drafted number 1 overall. Tom Brady was drafted 199th overall. Brady has 7 Super Bowl rings, and Alex Smith has 0. So maybe that's just the crux of everything right there. All right, moving on real quick from one GOAT to another. I read something in Adweek recently. I understand that it might be old news by now, but let me just read that here. There's one other thing I was going to say about Alex Smith, but I think we'll just put that to bed. Let's see. Let's pull up this article. It's about Leo Messi, right? From one GOAT to the other, from Brady to Messi. And it's about the impact economically that Messi has had on the MLS. And that's something we talked about over the summer when the news broke. Something we talked about with Josh Ricker a couple months ago. But it's also something that I think deserves to be looked at again. And I find it incredibly interesting. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to read this article from Adweek written by a man named Paul Hebert. And it says, quote, Lionel Messi's impact on Miami and soccer. The beautiful game just got more attractive in the U.S. And this was, I think, originally published like 4 or 5 weeks ago. But it shows some of the statistics, economically speaking, from Messi's arrival in the MLS. It says, quote, soccer has been growing in popularity in the United States, thanks in part to a dominant women's national team. But as any good marketer knows, a celebrity can change the game. On July 15th, Inter Miami Football Club announced the signing of 36-year-old global phenomenon Lionel Messi to a contract that runs until the end of the 2025 MLS season. It's an understatement to say that the deal has raised people's interest in the league, making it more attractive to advertisers and the platforms that carry the matches, including Apple TV Plus and HBO Max. Average monthly web searches for Lionel Messi in the United States during July and August, for example, increased more than 350% compared with the same time last year. Queries for Messi jersey surged around 1,140%. Demand for attending matches has also grown. Prior to rumors that the Argentinian superstar was joining Inter Miami, the team's average resale ticket price for 2023 home games was $31, according to the ticket platform SeatGeek. After news spread that Messi had agreed to play in the league, that figure spiked to $306. Sure enough, the entire MLS appears to be in a better position due to Messi. The average resale ticket prices for all matches this season climbed 15%, from $78 to $90, after the World Cup champions' arrival became official. As a spokesperson put it, quote, overall, this is the most in-demand MLS regular season we've ever seen on SeatGeek, end quote, end quote. So Hebert's article there outlines it all. There are even more infographics. Maybe I'll throw this up on our Instagram if I remember. It says average U.S. monthly web searches during July and August. In July and August 2022, people only Googled Lionel Messi 246,000 times a month. This year went to 1.1 million. So it's like a 4 times increase. You had 2% of adults in the summer of 2022 had heard news about Inter Miami in a positive way in the last week. During that same time period this year, it was 16%, 8 times more people. This is the one that really gets me. U.S. web traffic to the Inter Miami Football Club website last year peaked at 86,000 in July. This year, it peaked at 777,000. And lastly, global social mentions of Inter Miami in 2022 during the same time period were 70,000. This year, they're 3 million. So when we talk about it, in theory, like Josh and I did, or like Michael and I did, or like I did in July, it's one thing. But when you see the data come and unfold into real time, it's unbelievable. It really is. And to have Lionel Messi jersey be something that is Googled as often as it was is crazy. And there's just so much in all of this wrapped up in TV viewership, social interaction, buzz, viewership at the games, viewership on television, and merch sales. It's unbelievable what Messi has done for Miami, and these data points show that it goes just beyond merch. All right, speaking of merch, quick sidebar here. I mentioned this over the weekend on my live vid. We're proud to announce, just in time for the holiday season, Sportland Apparel Company. All right, Sportland Apparel Company, as you can probably tell, is an offshoot of Sportland USA, which is the media company that I founded that runs this podcast, as well as the Kyle Diesel Show and Odd Man Rush. Sportland USA is something I created in 2021 along with the help of some other friends. We've now expanded and we've created some merch. So we sell exclusively on Etsy at the moment. I'm going to throw up the link to our Etsy page in the bio. And that will be on our Instagram. And so if you are looking for a holiday gift, there's a lot of sports themed stuff on there. Some main theme stuff for all my mainers out there, some crossover between the two, some funny things, some odes, sort of like your classic sports tees. We're not licensed, so there's no, logos or anything of teams or whatnot. Just, some graphic tees, some sweatshirts, some hats that I've designed along with the help of some buddies. And I think it's going to be something that we can grow and that could be fun to expand as well, not just for sports related stuff, but anything else that you guys might all like. So if you wouldn't mind going and checking that out, that would be great. Sharing it with your friends, I'd be super helpful. We're trying to get super appreciative, that is. We're trying to get it off the ground in time for the holiday season and 2024, because it's going to be a busy year next year, and we're looking forward to it. We got some things down the pipe that I can't wait to tell you all about. We're going to try and grow as much as we can here, and you guys being a part of it as my listeners, I can't thank you enough. So I'll drop that link in my Instagram page in bio. You can check that out on Instagram at HomeFieldPod. All right, two last things to get to real quick before we wrap up the show. There's this whole NBA play-in tournament thing, and to be honest, I hadn't really paid attention to it. I didn't really find it to be that compelling. But last night I was looking through the channels, realized the Celtics were on, wanted to watch a little bit, so I watched like most of that game. Then it became apparent to me that the Celtics were going to win by the point differential needed to move on in the play-in tournament, and I decided not to watch anymore and go to bed. That said, they ended up basically needing all the minutes they could to pull off the victory. And for those of you who don't know, they had to win by 23 or more in order to move on in the play-in tournament, because the main tiebreaker is point differential. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that in basketball or in sports like football either, because it just leads to people running up the score, especially a sport like basketball where there's no possessions can change in seconds, and and scoring happens at will. It's not like football where there's a kickoff in between and a play clock and a game clock and, 4 downs and that kind of thing. And it's also not like baseball where, a lot has to happen for you to win by 15. Not a ton has to happen in basketball for you to win by 15. So I thought it was a little clunky once I realized that was the manner in which the Celtics were going to need to advance. I also think it was a little forced. I think Gorman and Scalabrine on the home broadcast were interviewing Porzingis at one point, and they were kind of forcing it. I mean, they were asking Drew Holiday about it at halftime. I mean, it just seemed a little bit clunky. I think the NBA is trying to decrease the early season slog and the load management and all that kind of stuff pre-Christmas, but I I think it's just sort of missing right now. And look, the Bulls coach wasn't too happy at one point. It seemed like he was a little bit upset, but then again in his post-game press conference, I listened to it. He said he didn't really blame Joe Mazzulla for doing what he was doing, and with regard to Andre Drummond and fouls and trying to get extra possessions and whatnot. Like, it just seemed like it was a much ado about nothing, and the NBA didn't really need this. As one friend of mine pointed out, you could easily have points allowed be a tiebreaker, whoever has the least points allowed, or whoever has the best road record is another way to do it. There's been a lot of comparisons to European soccer with all of this in-season tournaments, but what I'd say about the Champions League or the FA Cup or whatever is that those are separate matches that don't happen concurrently with a Premier League game. So to have an NBA in-season tournament that has won a regular season game that counts towards your overall standings, but also a in-season tournament in which point differential is looked at highly. Look, in soccer, point differential works because you're scoring one goal at a time. And in most cases, there aren't a ton of games where more than 4 or 5 goals are scored. I would say the average goals scored without looking it up in at least an English soccer match would be somewhere around 3 to 5 average. And that's like, I would say, on a high end. There are a lot of games that end 2-1, 2-0, 1-0, or 0-0, or 1-1, right? Like, there's just not a lot. So it works in soccer. It doesn't work in basketball because the point differential thing is really messy and causes people to get upset over running up the score or whatnot. And as much as, like, in the World Baseball Classic, run differential mattered, and a lot of people were upset over teams running up the score in baseball, it's significantly harder to run up the score in baseball. It just is. Like, there's a finite amount of innings. If you're winning, it's not like you get past the ninth inning. If you're winning, you play the top half of the ninth, you get one less chance at bat, right? It's different. So that's my big critique on the tournament. Is look, they got me to watch. I was intrigued. I kept the channel on. I'm not a huge NBA guy. I was rooting for the Celtics to do what they need to do to move on. And apparently they did that. But I'm sort of with Billy Donovan. Like, you can kind of look at it distasteful, but also, sort of understand that this is the creation of the league. Like, the league is pushing for this, right? And ultimately the consequences are going to be what they're going to be. And what we've already seen are some of those already. All right. Last thing, completely not sports related. Everyone's talking about their Spotify Wrapped today. I'll raise my hand. I use Apple Music, so I am left out. Perhaps you can look at this as possibly biased, but I cry foul because we have Apple Music Replay. I have yet to see one person post their Apple Music Replay. It's just the Spotify people like to post their Spotify Wraps. Maybe it's just more culturally significant at the moment. Perhaps Apple Music is sort of like people that, like Pepsi instead of Coke. I'm one of those people too. Maybe it's like people that watch the NHL over the NBA, because I'm also one of those people. So maybe I just fall in sort of the cultural minority, so to speak, on a lot of these hot pop culture things. But I just will say that if you post your Spotify Wrapped or your Apple Music Wrapped and your top 5 artists are people like Taylor Swift, Drake, Olivia Rodrigo, Lizzo, I don't know, Kanye West, I guess, isn't really in anymore. Wow, I'm really going to embarrass myself here if I keep trying to name musical artists. But if your top 5 Spotify Wrapped people are some of the most popular people in music, then I'm not sure what you're achieving by telling everybody you listened to some of the most popular people in music. Now, for me, my Spotify Wrapped, I would say, I don't have one, but my Apple Music version, I'd say probably 3 out of the 15 artists on it, on the top 15, you've probably heard of, right? I just don't listen to very popular music, so it's not really my thing. Perhaps maybe that's where my bias does come in. But it's just funny to see everybody post their Spotify Wraps. And some people are listening to like 100,000 minutes of music a year. I'm not Aristotle, but if I figure out how many hours that is, let's do that. Divided by 60, divided by 24. They're listening to like 70 days worth of music, all right? That's like them having their headphones in, listening to music 1 out of every 6 minutes that passes, right? Like, so I'm seeing some of these things. I'm also seeing like your top 12 songs are all the same artists. Well, that's weird. Maybe it's because you listen to the same album over and over again all year long. Like, I just don't understand the appeal to share with everybody. Now, look, I'll share with my wife, I'll share with my friends, but the dude that I went to baseball camp with in 7th grade doesn't need to see my Spotify Wrapped or my Apple Music replay. It's just kind of dumb. I felt the same way when people were playing Wordle or Immaculate Grid. I would share my Immaculate Grid with my friends who cared about Immaculate Grid. Or if I was playing Wordle with somebody who I was friends with, maybe I'd text it. But putting it on your Facebook timeline is just like, to me, that like screams something we would have done in like 2009. But here we are, 2023. Time is a flat circle, so I guess I'll just nip it in the bud right there. All right, speaking of time, we are out of time on this episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope you enjoyed the program. As always, as I said, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at HomefieldPod, and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, including here on YouTube. If you're watching our video feed, you can drop below, subscribe there too. We'll be back over the weekend at some point with a brand new pod, probably talking some more Patriots and NFL, maybe even some college football, depending on what the final rankings end up being. We'll mix in a little NHL and NBA if we can. But until then, I hope you all have a great rest of your week. We're into December. We're almost done with 2023, and it's going to be here before you know it. But until then, my name is Will Highland, and this has been Home Field Advantage.